My name is Simon Peter. I'm nothing but a lowly fisherman and whose life was changed by one man, Jesus of Nazareth. He was a teacher unlike anything I had ever seen before. He performed miracles. He healed the sick and raised the dead. I saw him with my own eyes. But this night in particular was a little bit different. The night felt so dark, like we had shadows pressing in around us. And my heart was heavy with a dread I really couldn't explain. See, we had just come from a meal where he talked about bread and blood and something about eating his flesh. I didn't fully understand, but we sang a hymn, and then one thing had led to another, but that was all like a distant memory at this point. So we came to the garden at Gethsemane. It was a place he often took us to pray, and there were beautiful olive trees that stood tall and silent, as if they were watching what was about to unfold. And Jesus turned to the others, and his face was only illuminated by the moonlight in that moment, and his voice was steady, but carried an unshakable sorrow in that moment. He said, "Sit here while I go to pray." So he took me, and he took James and John, and a little bit further, and left the rest of everybody else behind. I'd never seen him like this before. His steps faltered, like his shoulders were heavy, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on him. He said, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death." So he asked us, "Remain here and watch with me." In that moment, I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to offer him words of assurance, but my throat felt dry and my tongue was tied. What could I say to the one who had always been our strength? He went a short distance away and fell to his knees. I heard his voice. It was raw with anguish, lifted to the heavens. "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." What was he saying? This was our Lord, the one who had calmed storms with a word, who commanded demons to flee, who spoke life into the dead, and yet here he was pleading with the Father. His humanity in that moment was laid bare for us to see. I really did want to stay awake. I wanted to. I wanted to watch him as he asked us to, but my eyelids, they grew heavy. The strain of the night, the exhaustion of my fears, it all became too much. And before I knew it, I was asleep. His voice woke me, gentle but firm. "Could you not watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation," he said. "For the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." I was ashamed, but he was merciful. He went back to pray. His cries to the Father were even more desperate this time. I heard him again, "My Father, take this cup from me, but if not, your will be done." Suddenly, I found myself waking up. His face was staring right at mine. We were sleeping again. I couldn't meet his gaze. How could I? He literally asked me to do nothing. I couldn't even do that correctly. But maybe the weight of what happened next is what made this moment feel so real. The third time he went to pray, I saw him collapse to the ground, his face pressed against the floor. He was wrestling with a burden that I don't think any of us really got at that moment. When he returned, his voice was steady, though he had the marks of agony on it. "Take your rest later on," he told us. "See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Look, my betrayer is at hand." We were confused. As we stood, we suddenly see torches in the distance, the sounds of footsteps echoing in the dark. Somebody was coming, and that's when my heart sank. Judas was leading him. Behind him, a mob armed with swords and clubs, and I stood in front of Jesus between him and them, and my fear was gripping my chest like nothing else. And the one who had loved us so much, here he was walking toward his betrayal in that moment. What happened next just all happened so fast. One moment, Jesus was criticizing the Pharisees for seeking him out in the dead of night. The next moment, my face was hot with anger, and I slashed a man's ear off. But Jesus held me back. He said no. I was ready at that moment to defend Jesus to death. I would have taken a life for him. But instead, Jesus healed this man with a touch. And finally, Jesus stepped forward and he willingly yielded himself to the mob. Like a lamb to the slaughter, he went peacefully. And though I didn't understand it at that point, I understood it later that in the garden, Jesus had already won the battle. He didn't surrender to the mob. He surrendered to the will of the Father. So Jesus, our teacher, had been taken by the rabble into this courtyard. It was cold in that courtyard, and the night air bit at my skin, and the chill gripped my soul was far worse as I stood in the shadows watching and waiting. See, Jesus was betrayed by one of our own, Judas, and the mob dragged him before the high priest as nothing but torches were lighting the way in front of them. The rest of the disciples were long gone. The moment the mob took Jesus, they ran. But me? Now, I managed to follow Jesus at a safe distance, and I slipped into the courtyard of Caiaphas, the high priest. My face was pale. My heart was pounding. None of us really knew what was going to happen next, and for obvious reasons, we were afraid. Inside, I could see him standing there in front of the council. There in front of the Sanhedrin, these men of power who claimed that they knew God. They gathered at the dead of night for this moment. Clearly, they weren't seeking justice. They were seeking condemnation. One after another, false witnesses, they came forward, their voices rising with accusations. I could barely make out the words, but it didn't matter. Their testimonies didn't agree, and still they kept pressing. In the midst of the temptations and the chaos, I look over and I see Jesus. There he is, standing silently. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue with the Pharisees. He just stood there, calm, confident. Finally, the high priest rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the noise. "Have you no answer to make?" he said. "What is it that these men testify against you?" Still, Jesus said nothing. I clenched my fists. My chest was tightening with frustration and with fear. Why wouldn't Jesus speak? Why wouldn't he defend himself in that moment? I was ready. I was ready to throw myself into the fray. I was ready to get out there, get Jesus out of there, even if it cost me my life. But in that moment, something gave me peace. For some reason, I couldn't compel myself to go. Then Caiaphas, his voice filled with rage, demanded, "By the one true God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." The room fell silent. All their eyes turned to Jesus, and finally he spoke. His voice was steady and unshaken. "You have said so," he said. The crowd was shocked. But he didn't stop there. He continued, "But I tell you from now on that you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." The room erupted. Caiaphas tore his robes, shouting, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? Now you have heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" The response was swift and unanimous. He deserves death. I felt my knees weaken and my breath caught in my throat. Death? For what? For telling the truth? They began to spit on him, striking him with their fists. Some slapped him, mocking, "Prophesy to us, Jesus. Who is it that struck you?" I turned away, tears in my eyes, unable to watch this injustice. My Lord, my friend was being treated like a criminal, like less than a man. I had enough. I tried to get out of there. I tried to blend in with the crowd, and I stood by this fire. And "You," someone shouted, pointing right at me. He said, "You were with this Jesus of Galilee." My blood went cold. Suddenly, 100 eyes are locked on me. I don't know what you mean. What am I saying? This thought crossed my mind, but I kept a straight face. A few people continued to stare at me, but I guess I sold it well enough because they left me alone. A few moments later, I see Jesus getting taken away, and I'm trying to follow at a distance to watch, probably taking him to his death. And suddenly this little servant girl comes over, and she shouts, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Who is this person? Then a second time, with more gusto than the first, I shouted, "I don't know this man." My chest was in knots. This crowd would surely kill me. If they treated Jesus like that, I know they would treat me pretty poorly. Again, as I'm following behind the crowds, behind Jesus, a couple onlookers said that they knew me because of my accent. This time my denial was louder and more desperate. I swore at him. I said, I don't know him. And I shoot them off like they're bugs. And then through the crowds and through the noise, something caught my ear louder than anything else. A rooster crowed. I'm sure nobody else cared. Nobody else noticed. It's such a minor thing. But for me, that was the sound of my condemnation. You see, just yesterday, Jesus himself told me that I would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. No way, I said. No way am I going to deny you. I thought he was maybe being metaphorical or testing me or something, but no. Little did I know, he was right. He's always right. My face fell into my hands and I fled. Tears were streaming down my cheeks and my heart broke into pieces. As the dawn began to break, they bound Jesus and they led him away. And they delivered him to Pontius Pilate, governor of Judea. In that moment, I felt helpless. The one who had healed the sick and fed the hungry and raised the dead was now condemned to die. This couldn't be the end. I know Jesus. Somehow, in some way, he was still in control. You see, back at that dinner earlier that night, Jesus told us what was going to happen. He told us that he was going to be betrayed. But he went anyways. But more than that, he told us he wasn't going to eat again until it was with us in his kingdom, and that it was going to be fulfilled in his kingdom. He knew the future. He knew that he was going to die, but he still went through it with us. To be continued.